Hashtag the price of stars. Hashtag part 1. The ultimatum. The Council dreadnoughts emerged from slipspace like silent monuments to ancient power. 7 vessels, each the size of Manhattan, hung in perfect formation around Jupiter's crimson eye, their crystalline hulls refracting sunlight into prismatic warnings. Admiral Rahman watched them through the observation deck of Luna Station. Her reflection ghosted against the stars, dark skin weathered by decades of void duty, silver threading through close-cropped hair, eyes that had seen humanity's first stumbling steps beyond Sol and now witnessed what might be its last. Magnificent, aren't they? The voice belonged to General Viktor Makarov, his Russian accent thick with bitter admiration. 7 ships that could glass every human colony between here and Proxima Centauri. Rahman didn't turn, and yet they're just sitting there. For now. Makarov stepped beside her, his uniform crisp despite the emergency summons that had dragged him from the Martian defense grid. The Council isn't known for patience, Celeste. This ultimatum expires in 72 hours. Below them, Earth turned its ancient dance, blue-white marble against the infinite dark. Somewhere on that sphere, in the climate-controlled chambers of Geneva, humanity's leaders were deciding whether their species would bow or burn. The emergency session had been called within hours of the Council's arrival. Rahman remembered the chaos in the chamber, delegates shouting in a dozen languages while Secretary General Chun tried to maintain order. The message had been delivered by High Chancellor Varzek himself, his serpentine form coiled in the center of the holographic projection, eyes like molten gold fixed on humanity's representatives. The Terran Confederation has grown beyond acceptable parameters, Varzek had proclaimed, his translator rendering the alien clicks and hisses into cold, perfect English. Your expansion threatens galactic stability. Your technologies advance without oversight. Your species exhibits behavioral patterns inconsistent with civilized norms. A pause, deliberate and heavy. You will cease all colonial expansion immediately. You will submit to Council supervision of your military and technological development. You will accept permanent observer status within our government. These terms are non-negotiable. The chamber had erupted. Some delegates called for immediate acceptance. The Zarian hegemony alone possessed firepower to sterilize human space. Others demanded defiance, their voices rising in patriotic fervor. But Rahman had watched President Morrison's face, seen the weight of 7 billion souls settling on her shoulders. What would you do, Victor? Rahman asked now, still watching Earth turn. Makarov's laugh was humorless. I'd have launched the Aurora fleet the moment those bastards dropped out of slipspace, hit them before they could deploy their full strength, and doomed our species to extinction. Maybe, or maybe we'd have shown them that humans don't roll over for anyone. His reflection met hers in the glass. But you're not me, Admiral. You think before you shoot. Rahman finally turned. Behind them, Luna Station's command center buzzed with activity. Analysts tracking Council ship movements, communications officers maintaining contact with the scattered human fleets, logistics coordinators calculating supply lines for a war nobody wanted, but everyone seemed to expect. I've been thinking, Victor, about why they're really here. Enlighten me. Fear. The word hung between them like a confession. They're not angry about our expansion. They're terrified of it. In 50 years, we've colonized 27 systems. We've developed quantum slipspace drives that make their ancient hyperspace gates look like stone wheels. We've survived 3 separate extinction events and come back stronger each time. She gestured toward Earth. We're everything they're not. Chaotic, unpredictable, adaptive. And that scares them more than any weapon we could build. Makarov nodded slowly. So what do you propose? That we give them exactly what they fear most. 3 days later, Envoy Toma Equim stood in the shuttle bay of the CNS Diplomat's Edge. His formal robes weighted with the hopes of his species. The diplomatic vessel was sleek compared to the Council dreadnoughts, its hull inscribed with peace symbols in 17 languages, a gesture that felt increasingly naive as they approached the Nexus. The Council's seat of power defied human comprehension. Built around a neutron star, The nexus was a sphere of crystallized energy and exotic matter, its surface rippling with patterns that spoke of mathematics beyond terrestrial understanding. Thousands of ships orbited its equator like jeweled insects around a dying flame, representatives of species whose names were legend among the stars. First time seeing it, Envoy? Captain Martinez asked from the pilot's seat, her hands steady on controls despite the gravitational chaos surrounding them. No, tomari plaid softly. But I hoped I'd never need to see it again under these circumstances. He'd been here once before, as a junior attaché, during humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. Then, humans had been petitioners, seeking membership in the greater community of stars. The Council had granted them provisional status, not citizenship, but acknowledgement. It had felt like a victory. Now, watching the massive docking arms extend to embrace their tiny vessel, Toma wondered if that earlier triumph had been humanity's first step toward this precipice. The council chamber was a cathedral of living crystal, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried information between member species. Representatives from 47 civilizations filled tiered galleries, the aquatic depths floating in mobile atmosphere tanks, the energy-based luminary flickering like caged stars, the ancient architects whose forms were hidden within environmental suits that hummed with contained power. And at the center, on the prime dais, coiled high, Chancellor Varzek of the Zarian Imperium. Envoy Equim. Varzek's translator rendered his greeting with perfect diplomatic neutrality. You come before this council as humanity faces judgment. What word do you offer in your species' defense? Toma rose, feeling the weight of countless alien gazes. In his youth, he'd dreamed of standing here, not as a defendant, but as an equal. The irony wasn't lost on him. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I come not to offer defense, but understanding. You fear humanity because we are young and chaotic. But chaos is not evil. It is potential. The same unpredictability you cite as our weakness has allowed us to survive when older, more established species might have perished. A ripple of movement through the galleries. Interest or irritation, impossible to tell. Our expansion has been rapid, yes, but always peaceful. Our technologies advance quickly because we build on the wisdom of others, including your own contributions to galactic science. We are not here to replace the Council, but to join it as partners in shaping the future. From a Varellan section, Ambassador Elson shifted. The Varellans were ancient even by Council standards, their crystalline forms holding memories that span millennia. Elson had been present at humanity's first contact, had argued for patience when other species called for immediate quarantine. The human speaks of partnership, Varzek replied, his golden eyes fixed on Toma. Yet your species refuses to accept limitations. Your colonial expansion continues despite our concerns. Your military fleets patrol sovereign space without permission. Your very presence here proves our point. Humans take what they want through force or negotiation, never distinguishing between the two. The accusation stung because it held truth. Humanity's diplomatic victories often came at the barrel of a plasma cannon, their peaceful intentions backed by quantum torpedo launchers. It was the same pattern that had defined human history: cooperation when possible, dominance when necessary. We expand because we must, Toma said finally. It is our nature to reach for new horizons, to plant seeds among distant stars. But we do not expand at others' expense. Every human colony has been established in uninhabited systems, on worlds that know no other claim. For now, rumbled Corthane of the Hegemon Alliance, his massive form shifting in its environmental tank. But what happens when you encounter resistance? When expansion meets immovable obstacles? Your history suggests violence. The chamber fell silent. This was the crux of Council fears, not human expansion, but what would happen when humanity could no longer expand peacefully? Their projection models showed the same result: war, conquest, the subjugation of weaker species under human dominance. You ask us to trust you, Varzek continued, when your own leaders cannot agree on basic policy. Even now, we detect massive military buildups in your outer systems. Your Admiral Rahman conducts training exercises that look remarkably like preparations for war. How can we negotiate with a species that speaks of peace while sharpening their claws? Toma's heart sank. They knew about the Aurora fleet, about Rahman's maneuvers in the Kuiper Belt. Of course they knew. The Council's intelligence networks span the galaxy. The military preparations are defensive. Lies. Varzek's voice rose, the translator struggling to convey alien rage. You speak of defense while your fleets mass for attack. You claim peaceful intentions while preparing for war. This is why humanity cannot be trusted with freedom. You are too dangerous to yourselves and others. Then what would you have us do? The question came from Ambassador Elson, her crystalline form flickering with internal light. The Varellans remember when we too were young and chaotic. The Council offered us guidance, not subjugation. The Varellans were never this dangerous, Varzek snapped. They expanded slowly, carefully, with respect for established order. Humans are cancer, growing without limit, consuming resources, threatening stability wherever they spread. The word hit Toma like a physical blow. Cancer, not just expansion, but malignancy. In Varzek's view, humanity wasn't just chaotic, they were a disease to be contained or excised. The vote has already been decided, Varzek continued, his tone returning to diplomatic neutrality. The Council demands immediate compliance with our terms. Cease expansion, submit to oversight, accept observer status, refuse, and face the consequences. And if we comply? Toma asked, though he already knew the answer. Then humanity survives. Under guidance, under control. Varzek's eyes glittered. The choice is yours, Envoy. Slavery or extinction. The session ended in formal ritual, ancient words and dead languages sealing humanity's fate. As delegates filed out, Toma remained seated, staring at the empty prime dais. Slavery or extinction. Not the words of a negotiation, but an ultimatum dressed in diplomatic language. A gentle touch on his shoulder made him turn. Ambassador Elson stood behind him, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's fading light into rainbow patterns. I am sorry, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I argued for clemency, but the vote was predetermined. Too many species fear what humanity might become. What we might become, Toma repeated. Not what we are, but what we might be. Is there truly a difference? The Zarian were once explorers too, before they became conquerors. The hegemony began as a peaceful alliance before it devoured half the outer rim. Species change, Envoy, usually for the worse. Toma stood, his formal robes suddenly feeling like a shroud. And humans? What do you think we'll become? Elson was quiet for a long moment, her internal light pulsing in patterns that spoke of deep thought. Something new, she said finally. Something that has never existed before. Whether that will be wonderful or terrible, even we cannot foresee. As Toma walked back to the shuttle bay, he carried with him the weight of absolute failure. Humanity had been judged not for its actions, but for its potential. And that potential, in the Council's view, was too dangerous to allow. The transmission reached Luna Station 6 hours later. Negotiations had failed. The Council demanded unconditional surrender within 24 hours or face immediate military action. Admiral Rahman read the message twice, then looked up at the tactical display showing 7 massive dreadnoughts maintaining their vigil around Jupiter. Somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system, her own fleets were completing final preparations, not for surrender, but for something the galaxy hadn't seen in over 1,000 years. A war between equals. The Aurora fleet materialized at the edge of the Sirius system like a storm front of steel and plasma. 147 ships of the line, their hulls scarred by decades of colonial expansion and asteroid mining, quantum drives still glowing from the emergency slipspace jump. At their head, the dreadnought Sinus Defiance carried Admiral Rahman's flag, Not the pristine diplomatic vessel that had carried humanity's hopes to the Nexus, but a warship built for the hard business of survival. Signal from the flagship, Admiral, reported Commander Walsh from the communication station. All fleet elements report ready for engagement. Rahman nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Council force was already in system. 23 vessels of various classes, their formation precise and intimidating. At the center, the Zarian dreadnought Inevitable Victory flew high, Chancellor Varzek's personal standard, its crystalline hull refracting starlight into prismatic warnings. Incoming transmission, Walsh continued. Council frequency. Put it through. Varzek's image materialized in the holographic display, his serpentine form coiled in what humans had learned to recognize as aggressive posture. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship hummed with alien efficiency. Admiral Rahman. His translator rendered the greeting with cold formality. You arrive at the moment of your species' judgment. Surrender now, and your crews will be granted the mercy of quick death. Continue this futile resistance, and we will ensure your worlds burn slowly. Rahman stepped forward, her uniform bearing the battle ribbons of 3 colonial wars and the Titan Rebellion. High Chancellor, I bring humanity's answer to your ultimatum. Speak it. No. The word hung in space between the two fleets, simple and absolute. Varzek's eyes narrowed, his translator struggling to convey alien emotions. Then you have chosen extinction. We've chosen freedom. There's a difference. The transmission cut, leaving Rahman alone with her thoughts and the weight of command. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, not the desperate energy of the doomed, but the focused calm of professionals who knew their business. These weren't the green recruits who'd crewed humanity's first starships, but veterans of a dozen campaigns, survivors who'd learned to thrive in the galaxy's hostile embrace. Admiral, called Lieutenant Shun from the sensor station. Council fleet is moving into attack formation. Estimate 12 minutes to weapons range. Signal the fleet. Implement Maneuver 7. The Aurora fleet began to move, its formation shifting from standard battle line to something more complex. Ships peeled away from the main body, diving toward the system's asteroid belt, while others climbed out of the ecliptic plane. To outside observers, it might have looked like chaos, a desperate scattering in the face of superior force. Varzek's tactical officers would have recognized it as something else entirely. They're running, the High Chancellor observed, watching the human formation dissolve on his tactical display. Typical human cowardice. They threatened defiance until faced with actual consequences. Sir, interrupted his tactical coordinator, a young Zarian whose scales still held the blue-green of inexperience. The human formation suggests desperation. Varzek cut him off. Press the attack. Show these mammals the price of challenging the Council. The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, their energy shields shimmering like soap bubbles around crystalline hulls. Ancient weapons charged with the power of dying stars, point defense systems tracking the scattered human vessels. This would be less a battle than an execution, swift, clean, demonstrative. The first surprise came when the asteroids began to move. Gravitic anomalies throughout the belt, reported the sensor officer, his voice rising with confusion. Massive objects changing vector without visible propulsion. On the tactical display, chunks of rock and ice began accelerating toward the Council formation. Not randomly, but with purpose, shepherded by invisible forces toward precise intercept courses. Impossible, Varzek breathed. The energy requirements. Sir, detecting quantum field fluctuations consistent with artificial gravity generation. The humans are using their ships as mobile gravitational anchors, turning the entire asteroid belt into a weapon. It was audacious beyond belief. Each human vessel was generating localized gravity wells, using their quantum drives to create invisible hands that could pluck asteroids from their orbits and hurl them like stones from a giant sling. The technique required perfect coordination, split-second timing, and power expenditure that would drain most ships' reserves in minutes. The humans had built their entire battle plan around it. The first impact struck the Council formation's flanks, not the massive asteroids that dominated the tactical display, but smaller fragments accelerated to appreciable fractions of light speed. Council shields flared and held, but the constant bombardment forced formation changes, disrupted targeting solutions, created chaos in what should have been orderly destruction. Return fire. Varsek commandit. All vessels. Concentrate on a human flagship. The Council's response was devastating. Particle beams that could crack planets lanced across space, seeking the CNS defiance through the storm of accelerated debris. But Rahman's ship wasn't where the targeting computers expected. It was dancing through the asteroid field like a fighter, using the same gravitational manipulation that hurled rocks to perform impossible maneuvers. Direct hit on the hegemony cruiser dominance, reported Commander Walsh, his voice professionally calm despite the chaos around them. Their shields are down, taking secondary explosions. Rahman watched the tactical display with the cold calculation of a lifetime warrior. The Council fleet was bigger, more advanced, crewed by species with centuries of military experience. But they were fighting according to doctrine, expecting their enemies to do the same. Humans had never been good at following rules. Signal Squadron 4. Initiate close assault. From the far side of the asteroid belt, 18 human destroyers emerged at maximum acceleration, their hulls glowing with waste heat from overcharged drives. They came in fast and low, using the gravitational chaos to mask their approach until they were inside the Council formation's defensive envelope. The destroyers were suicide ships, lightly armored, barely shielded, their weapons systems jury-rigged for maximum output. They wouldn't survive long in a conventional engagement, but Rahman hadn't brought them for survival. Ramming speed, she whispered, though no one on her bridge could hear. The first destroyer struck the Zarian cruiser Eternal Judgment amidships, its quantum core detonating in a flash that briefly outshone Sirius itself. The second and third found targets among the Council's screening vessels, their deaths buying precious seconds for their sisters to close range. By the time Varzek realized what was happening, 6 of his ships were gone or crippled, their ancient hulls split open like rotten fruit. Impossible, he repeated, but the tactical display showed only truth. Half his fleet was combat ineffective, his formation shattered, his carefully planned execution transformed into desperate survival. "Sir," his communications officer called out, receiving priority transmission from the Nexus. "Grand Admiral Kethvirin is ordering immediate withdrawal to regroup." Varzek's rage was palpable, his serpentine form coiling in patterns that spoke of barely contained violence. "We outnumber them still. We can." "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting additional human fleets entering the system. At least 200 vessels, possibly more." The reinforcements were arriving exactly as Rahman had planned. Not to save the Aurora fleet, but to exploit the victory her people had died to create. The Council had expected to face desperate human colonies with minimal fleet support. Instead, they found themselves confronting the full might of the Terran Confederation. Every ship that could carry weapons or shields converging on Sirius for humanity's first major fleet engagement. "All vessels," Varzek commanded through clenched teeth, "withdraw to safe distance. Prepare for slip-space jump." The Council fleet retreated in good order, their withdrawal covered by long-range fire that kept the human ships at respectful distance. But as they jumped to hyperspace, they left behind something unprecedented, proof that the ancient powers of the galaxy could be defeated. The Peace Summit convened on Kepler Station, humanity's newest diplomatic outpost orbiting a blue giant in neutral space. The choice of venue was itself a statement. Not the Council's Crystal Cathedral or Earth's sterile conference rooms, but a human structure built for the specific purpose of hosting this negotiation. Envoy Toma arrived aboard the same diplomatic vessel that had carried him to his failure at the Nexus, but everything else had changed. The human delegation now included Admiral Rahman, her uniform bearing fresh decorations from the Battle of Sirius, and General Makarov, whose hardline stance suddenly seemed less extreme in light of recent events. Ambassador Elsin met them at the docking bay, her crystalline form dim with exhaustion. The past weeks had not been kind to Council moderates. Varzek's faction blamed them for underestimating humanity, while the hardliners called for immediate escalation to full-scale war. Envoy Toma, she greeted him formally. You return under different circumstances. Different, yes, but I hope not entirely changed. Toma gestured toward his companions. May I present Admiral Rahman, who I believe needs no introduction, and General Makarov of Mars Defense Command. Elsin's internal light flickered in what humans had learned to recognize as diplomatic amusement. The architects of our recent education. Welcome to Kepler Station. The negotiations took place in a conference room designed to accommodate multiple species, variable atmosphere controls, gravitational adjustment fields, and translation equipment that could handle the subtle emotional nuances that often decided the fate of civilizations. The human delegation sat across from their council counterparts, the weight of recent battles hanging between them like an unspoken threat. High Chancellor Varzek had not come himself. Whether from wounded pride or strategic calculation, Toma couldn't tell. In his place sat Admiral Kethvirin of the hegemony, her massive form filling an environmental tank that hummed with barely contained power. Beside her, Ambassador Elsin served as the voice of moderation, while other council members watched with varying degrees of hostility or curiosity. Let us begin with honesty, Admiral Kethvirin rumbled, her translator rendering the words with careful neutrality. The council underestimated human military capability. This was educational, but do not mistake tactical success for strategic victory. Humanity remains outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Rahman leaned forward, her scarred hands folded on the table. And yet here we sit, negotiating as equals. That suggests our tactical success was more significant than you're willing to admit. You proved you can hurt us, Kethvirin acknowledged. The question is whether you understand the cost of continued aggression. The Sirius engagement was a skirmish by galactic standards. Escalation would bring forces that could sterilize human space within months. Then let's discuss alternatives, Toma interjected smoothly. The Council's original ultimatum is no longer viable. Humanity will not accept subjugation. But perhaps we can find terms that address your legitimate concerns without compromising our fundamental freedoms. For 3 days they negotiated, mapping the boundaries of a new galactic order. The Council's fears were not entirely unreasonable. Humanity's expansion rate was unprecedented, their technological development alarming, their military doctrine based on principles that older species found disturbing. But their demand for complete submission was equally unacceptable to human leaders who'd rather see their species extinct than enslaved. The breakthrough came when Ambassador Elsin proposed a radical solution, conditional autonomy. Humanity will accept limits on expansion, she suggested during a private session with a human delegation. Not prohibitions, but quotas, a measured growth rate that allows development without triggering resource conflicts. In exchange, the Council recognizes Terran sovereignty and grants full membership rights. And the oversight provisions? Rahman asked. Mutual. Human observers at Council military facilities, Council observers at human strategic installations. Transparency instead of subjugation. It wasn't perfect. No treaty ever was. But it offered something both sides could accept, dignity. Humanity would remain free to chart its own course among the stars, while the Council gained assurance that human expansion wouldn't destabilize existing power structures. The signing ceremony took place in Kepler Station's central plaza, under an artificial sky that showed the glory of local nebulae in impossible colors. Representatives from 47 species watched as Toma affixed his signature to humanity's new place in galactic civilization. Not as petitioners or subjects, but as partners in the ancient work of turning chaos into order. Today, he said to the assembled delegates, we acknowledge that the galaxy is large enough for both stability and growth, for order and chaos, for ancient wisdom and youthful vigor. May this treaty mark not an ending, but a beginning. Later, as the various delegations prepared to depart, Admiral Rahman found herself alone with Ambassador Elson on an observation deck overlooking the station's docking bays. Ships from dozens of species filled the berths, sleek council vessels alongside blocky human cruisers, all united by the fragile promise of peace. "Your people fought well," Elson said quietly. "Better than we expected." "We fought like humans," Rahman replied. "Stubborn, chaotic, and too stupid to know when we're beaten." Elson's crystalline form flickered with what might have been laughter. "Perhaps that's what the galaxy needs. The Council has grown comfortable, predictable. We've forgotten that growth requires change, and change requires risk. So what happens now? Now we discover whether two very different philosophies can coexist in the same universe." Elson turned toward the observation port, her reflection mixing with the stars beyond. "I believe they can. But belief and reality are often very different things." Rahman nodded, watching a human transport dock alongside a Varellan cruiser, their crews working together to transfer diplomatic pouches and cultural exchanges. It was a small thing, perhaps insignificant in the grand scope of galactic politics, but it represented something unprecedented. The possibility that humanity's chaotic energy and the Council's ancient wisdom might create something greater than either could achieve alone. The price of stars, it turned out, wasn't paid in blood or treasure, but in the courage to imagine a future different from the past. Whether that future would prove worthy of the cost remained to be seen. But for the first time in generations, both humans and aliens had reason to hope.